The Hollywood actress and lifestyle guru Gwyneth Paltrow called it conscious uncoupling when she divorced the musician Chris Martin. The American country music singer Tammy Wynette spelled it out in her song Divorce. And if you didn't catch that, it spells divorce. We are talking about divorce and the fact that it's quite difficult in some countries to consciously uncouple from someone you've sworn before God and family and community to have and to hold till death do you part. There are laws governing the process because it is basically a legally binding contract between two people. Over time, many countries have introduced what is called a no-fault divorce, where the legal process is simple and doesn't involve blaming one or the other party for violating the terms of the deal. South Africa has that. Uganda is debating the issue because it still uses a fault-based divorce system, which means you have to prove that your partner broke the agreement by, let's say, sleeping with someone outside of your marriage, adultery in other words, or cruelty, abandonment, and so on. A local rights group, Chapter 4 Uganda, says this often, and I quote, exacerbates conflict and emotional distress for the couple, families, and children involved. The alternative? Just agree it's over, and that should do it. But Uganda's courts have decided to stick with the fault model, saying it helps prevent rash breakups. So let's take a look at each system, fault or no fault. As I said earlier, South Africa has had the no fault system since 1979. So Muhammad Abduroaf is in Cape Town to tell us more. But let's hear first from Francis Tumwezige Atinye in Uganda. They are both lawyers. Francis told me what the situation was right now in Uganda following the court ruling.
Well, I wouldn't say I know the statistics, but what I know is that there's a general feeling that, divorce is still at a low rate. I wouldn't attribute that to the law because there are many factors, the social aspects of it, the cultural aspects of it, because it's still quite frowned upon in Uganda to be a divorcee or to seek divorce. And also Uganda has a lot of Christian influence. So a combination of Christianity, culture, and law have made divorce a bit of an extremely last resort that someone would want to seek. So what happens eventually, a marriage can actually break down and spouses are no longer practically married and are not talking and each one is on their own, but somehow they stay married for the duration of their life. And that's because of the 3 or 4 factors I've highlighted.
What about in South Africa, Mohammed? Is it too easy to get a divorce in South Africa?
From 2023 to 2024, there has been a 10% increase in divorces. Now, 10% is quite a lot. So divorces are obviously on the rise in South Africa. I wouldn't say necessarily it's because the law is always easy to get divorced, but I think people are a bit more liberal now and they're moving away from the old way of thinking that, I must stay married for the sake of the children, or society will think bad of me if I get divorced. So I think people are more open to the idea of getting divorced in today's modern times.
What's your view on the no-fault divorce that lawyers in Uganda were arguing for?
I was part of that divorce petition, which the Constitutional Court decided that no-fault divorce is not yet, I should say welcome to Uganda. But the point is that there are 2 categories of divorces. There is a type of divorce where both parties want out of the marriage. That one even in Uganda happens. You go to court, file a petition, the other person does not oppose it or consents to it, but you still have to wait for the 6 months nonetheless anyway. But the second category of divorce where one party wants out of the marriage, the other party does not want, which to me means there is a dispute. And when there are disputes, we all go to independent arbiters, and then you need a court of law to determine that dispute. That's where you get the requirement for the party which wants out of the marriage to prove the reasons why they want out of the marriage. There has to be due process for both parties. The no-fault divorce system tends to favor the party who wants out of the marriage at the expense of the other party who may not be wanting out of the marriage. The system we have gives both parties a chance to be heard in court and for a decision to be made by independent arbiters. In the same way, courts resolve all other disputes that happen between people and institutions. So I think a marital relationship is not any different from all other human relationships.
But most human relationships are not governed by courts and court decisions, though, are they?
We just cannot work out. They are governed by frameworks. For example, employment law, there is a framework which you follow when you're entering employment and when you're exiting. You talk of contract, same story, there is a framework which you follow when you're entering and when you're exiting. Now, proponents of the no-fault system, their view is, if I want out, I want out. Basically, I want out, that is all. I don't care what the other party thinks. I don't care what the other concerns of the public are. So what we are saying is, divorce is okay if you want out, but follow a process, and there is a framework which has to be followed. And if there is a party who is not aggrieved, that party should have a right to be heard in court.
But what's the remedy for somebody who doesn't want to be married to you anymore? Muhammad, what are your thoughts on this? One of the arguments that the lawyers who were arguing for a no-fault system were saying that the fault system was outdated. What do you think?
My view would be that if somebody really does not want to be married to you, you cannot force that person to remain married to you. And the only way you can be out of that marriage if it's incest, if there must be adultery, cruelty, and abandonment, and so on. If those are the only requirements that are applicable, you will have a situation where somebody will be stuck in a marriage indefinitely, as long as the other spouse is a good spouse and he loves you or she loves him, but the receiving spouse does not want to be married. He or she fell out of love of the marriage. So I think with modern times and how the law has developed and the constitution and all those rights, if a party no longer loves the other party and wants to be out of the marriage, that should be reason enough to leave the marriage. And that will obviously enforce your right to dignity, equality, and so on.
There are also people who argue that having a fault divorce system means that couples try harder to stay married. Francis, do you think that that's the case?
I think partly yes, but you don't have empirical evidence to support it, which is why I would tend to fall back on the due process argument. But certainly true. But you were asking, what's the remedy of someone who doesn't want to stay married to you? I mean, the same question the other party can ask, what also is the remedy of someone who is still interested in the marriage? Because, for example, our constitution says male and female of adult age are entitled to get married, and they have equal protection at the point of entering the marriage, during the marriage, and the point of dissolution of the marriage. So the equal protection is when you're entering, both of you need consent. During the marriage, you're both protected. When you're exiting the marriage, now the Ugandan law says both of you are entitled to equal rights. The no-fault divorce system seems to apply different standards at the point of exiting, that, okay, entering, we are together, during, we are together, but dissolution, only me who wants out. I mean, I have an upper hand, which I think that's the issue that we find to be critical in that discussion.
Let's talk about what happens with the division of assets. Muhammad, in the no-fault divorce, is it a sort of straightforward process, or is it the site of conflict? Does a no-fault divorce make it easier?
So I think this is probably where some type of credence gets applied to the fault aspect. Yeah, so for example, let's say the parties got married and wife has an affair immediately after the marriage, and because she got into the marriage, for argument's sake, with zero in a bank account, he had $1 million in his bank account. He wants to divorce her, so technically she's entitled to $500,000 at the divorce because of married income with property. If he can argue and say the reason for the divorce is because of the wife's fault, she caused the divorce, and it will be unfair for her to obtain that $500,000, half my estate, because of her fault. The court can make such an order, and she leaves with basically zero, and he leaves with his $1 million again.
And Francis, in the case of the fault divorce, what happens with the division of assets?
The issue of property is an independent contest altogether. Once the court has made a decision to dissolve the marriage, then who is entitled to what in the matrimonial property is another issue that is tried, and each party brings their justifications and their evidence, and then the court makes a decision.
That's Muhammad Abduroaf in Cape Town and Francis Tumwezige Atinyi in Kampala. This is Focus on Africa from the BBC World Service.